Hello and welcome to People and Profit, where we look at how business shapes our world. I'm Marcus Carlson. Coming up, Exchange Alliance. As the stock exchanges in London and Frankfurt are set to merge, we'll ask whether national sovereignty is at stake. Is Italy's labour market out of its rut? It's time to grade the Italian government's Jobs Act 1 year after its rollout. Plus, bottoms up in Burma. We visit a pioneering vineyard there that's tapping into the changing tastes of Southeast Asia. First, though, to what would be a blockbuster €27 billion merger. The London Stock Exchange and Germany's Deutsche Boerse have agreed to join forces. Together, they would become one of the world's biggest exchange companies, but there's concern in both Britain and Germany of sovereignty being lost. We'll look at that in a moment, but let's start with the outlines of the deal.
It's being billed as a merger of equals, but for many it looks more like a takeover. The London Stock Exchange and the Deutsche Boerse, which runs the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, are set to fully merge by the first quarter of 2017. But what exactly would the combined group look like? For starters, it would be worth around $30 billion or 27 billion euros, making it one of the world's largest exchange operators. And although its headquarters would be in London, LSE shareholders would own 45.6% of the group, and Deutsche Boerse shareholders 54.4%. The current CEO of the German exchange, Carsten Kengeter, would stay on as chief executive, with the LSE's current French CEO set to leave. The proposed deal is not without its detractors. In London, fears centre on whether a German majority group would care enough about medium-sized British businesses, while some Germans see the merger as an attack on the standing of Frankfurt as a global financial centre. This isn't the first time a merger of this sort has been proposed. The Bourse tried and failed to buy the LSE back in 2005. It was a similar story with the New York Stock Exchange 4 years ago. Even now, the London-Frankfurt merger isn't a done deal, with the American group Intercontinental Exchange expressing interest in making a rival bid for the LSE.
For more now on the proposed merger, let's speak to Ken Odeluga. He's market analyst at City Index in London. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Ken. I want to ask you first of all, the LSE and Deutsche Boerse say that this is a merger of equals. Others say that this is a takeover by Deutsche Boerse. What do you think?
Well, technically and, on many other levels, it's pretty clear that this is actually a takeover of London Stock Exchange by Deutsche Boerse. And the premium that we've seen added to London Stock Exchange shares since the deal was disclosed on the 16th of March, premium worth about, total in the market, about 1.7 billion, demonstrates also that it's a takeover by Deutsche Boerse, or by Deutsche Boerse of London Stock Exchange. But on the other hand, there are other things worth bearing in mind, namely that the profit contribution, or proposed profit contribution of the two exchanges will not be equal, but on the other hand, the earnings will not be sort of like in line with that. So in other words, London Stock Exchange investors will actually earn more than their contribution in terms of the merger. So, there are checks and balances.
Does that mean then that London will lose influence in the financial world?
This is the big question, and it's quite difficult to answer, but my view is that's unlikely to happen. We are not in the year 2000, we're not in the year 1995, and we're certainly not in the middle of the last century where stock exchanges had a very much more national character. Now, stock exchanges in the 21st century are very much global electronic businesses, which are in many, many senses beyond borders.
Now, the LSE and Deutsche Boerse say that this deal works for both of them. But what about investors and what about small and medium-sized companies? Because the primary job, after all, of a stock market is essentially to connect investors with money to companies that are in need of funds. As I say, do you think that the deal would work for companies?
The London Stock Exchange has now a very well-established tradition of providing additional capital for small and medium-sized companies, particularly through the small cap listing process, and also, of course, the alternative investment market listing process. Now, this is so well established. It's a long-running business and long-running sort of like process, and a good business for a London Stock Exchange. It seems highly unlikely that the London Stock Exchange would in any way seek to jeopardize that in the future. And it would actually be contrary to part of the rationale of Deutsche Boerse wanting to tie up with London Stock Exchange to actually look askance at that line of revenues as well.
Ken Olaluga, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.
We're going to move on now. France is debating an overhaul of its labour laws in a bid to boost hiring. The French government is trying to follow in the footsteps of neighbouring European countries. Italy's Prime Minister Matteo Renzi says a reform programme there has been a success. Businesses too in Italy say that the so-called Jobs Act is helping, but unions say workers are paying the price. A year after the reforms were rolled out, our team in Italy has found out more.
Michele is relieved. After 4 years of successive fixed-term contracts, he has finally landed a permanent contract in this distillery.
E Luisa, è pronta l'essenza per il lampone?
Sì, questo è per il lampone.
Taken on at the end of December, he controls the products manufactured in the laboratory. He's 31 years old with a master's in quality control and has just signed a new contract prescribed by the Jobs Act.
Sono 500 e prima con il determinato non sapevo.
Before, with fixed-term contracts, I was always uncertain. I never knew if I would have to leave at the end of each contract. Now this contract gives me new perspectives. I can make plans, start to think about buying a house.
This company has taken on 3 new employees following the Jobs Act. For each employee, the company receives €24,000 of tax rebates over 3 years, during which time the contract can be revoked at any time.
With the globalization of today, the production methods have changed. In a company like ours, we need to be able to hire people when we need to and dismiss them when we are struggling. This new contract gives us that flexibility.
A flexibility that the unions have difficulty accepting.
The Jobs Act is a law that has allowed widespread job instability, because today a young person is in a precarious situation even if they have a permanent contract, as they can be fired at any moment by their employer. Unlawful dismissals have been declared lawful.
For Matteo Renzi, the head of the Italian government, the Jobs Act is a bet that has paid off, and he publicises it proudly throughout Rome. Since the implementation of the Jobs Act, more than 764,000 permanent contracts have been signed in the peninsula. According to the Institute of National Statistics, in 2015, the unemployment figures in Italy had fallen for the first time in 7 years.
Now, alongside Italy, Spain has also gone ahead with similar labour reforms, and France is mulling its own version. But are these efforts actually paying off? Kate Moody has been looking at the reforms and their results. Kate.
Well, Marcus, these reforms are all about adding flexibility to traditionally rigid labour markets. France and Italy, for example, have introduced tax breaks for companies that hire. Spain now limits the amount of severance pay that can be awarded, a proposal the French government has had to backtrack on. All 3 countries want individual employers and workers to be able to negotiate working conditions and hours locally instead of collective bargaining by unions at the national level. The Spanish effort has been perhaps the most drastic and has had the most time to start showing results. Italy enacted its Jobs Act in 2015, while the Hollande government is hoping to push its reform bill through Parliament this year. Now, the bottom line is whether these reforms are really helping ordinary people. Spain, which is represented on our graph in red, has seen its jobless rate drop steadily since reaching an all-time high near 27% in 2013. Italy, in green, has seen the percentage of people looking for work drop below 12%. France has the lowest unemployment rate, but it's stuck around a stubborn 10%, with few signs of improvement. Spain has also taken the lead in economic recovery, with its GDP growing 3.2% last year. Expansion in France and Italy has lagged behind at 1.2% and 0.8% respectively. Now, some critics argue that these reforms have pushed labour markets into a precarious position with little job security. In Italy in particular, the measures have led to more workers in part-time or temporary jobs. Others say many people have given up looking for work altogether, meaning they no longer officially count in unemployment statistics, but they're still without a job. The reforms have also sparked huge public protests, particularly in France and Spain, showing that for these so-called sick men of Europe, the prescription can prove to be a very bitter pill indeed. Marcus?
All right, thank you very much, Kate. Next to something that the French, the Italians and the Spanish are all very good at, and that's wine. But forget about European vineyards for a moment. We're taking you to a pioneering venture in Burma. Two German entrepreneurs are braving the tropical climate there to make wine. Their grapes are thriving, and so is their business.
It's grape harvest time at this winery in Burma. It may be an unusual setting for a vineyard, but the Aitaya winery has been making highly drinkable wines here in this tropical climate for over a decade. Grape-loving animals are just one problem the owners, two German wine experts, have dealt with. The climate has been the biggest challenge.
We are in a tropical climate, and the wine plant is not a tropical plant. So we have to face the problem with the day length is too short. We have to face the problem with the rainy season, in which the fungus are eating the grapes and infecting the plants. This is really very difficult to fight.
Since their first production run in 2004, the business has grown and now branches out to 30 contract farms. They now produce over 150,000 bottles a year. Despite the demand for wine to be comparatively low in Burma, every one of those bottles goes to the domestic market. However, the tiny Burmese middle class has started to expand, leaving this winery plenty of room for potential growth. And there could be a future for this Burmese German wine outside the country too. The two owners plan to boost production to 1 million bottles a year and start exporting to nearby China.
With that, we've reached the end of this People and Profit. Thank you for watching, and get in touch with any tips or questions you may have for the show. Go to our Facebook page or tweet me at MarcusF24. Bye for now.